in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Boom. And just like that, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Case Closed, highest level conversations on the most relevant topics in this space, ladies and gentlemen. Every Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the place to be. And as we come in, shout out already a super chat waiting for us. Shout out to the Deacon in the building, right? $3 indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, you see the topic as you're coming in, reading that topic, clicking that like button and sharing the stream. We're talking about rising in this socioeconomic ladder, right? How to successfully embed yourself there, raise a family, leave a legacy. And college has been one of the ways in which it is guaranteed that you're going to come out safe, a nice safety net, a good job, respectability, status, and whatnot, right? But recently, the sentiments have been changing. People are saying, hey, high college tuition, long investment in terms of time for an outcome that is not necessarily guaranteed, right? That was a study that says that 56% of Americans feel this way about college degrees, basically saying, hey, college degrees are not that worth it. So just want to get a simple reaction with regards to the sentimental aspect. We'll get into the numbers later. We'll break it down into the different kinds of degrees you can get and whatnot. But overall, what is your sentiment, Kaizo, right? Most college degrees, let me just put it, I say 80% of college degrees are a bad investment. What is your sentiment regarding that, Kaizo, then LER, and then Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, so, we've got to look at the market, right? Our parents' generations, right, or whatever generation you want to call that, they could get a degree in anything, actually. At that point, they were the educated class. Jobs were waiting for them. And at that time, if you're looking at the whole comfortability of getting into the real estate market, a house, let's say average pay would have been like $7,000. A house will cost you $20,000, right? So you could actually afford, if comfort what you're looking for, right? We're just choosing some axioms to go to university, get overly educated, and be above your peers. However, right now, as the market is appearing, right, most degrees are not what the paper is printed on, because most degrees don't actually require. Most degrees don't give an market advantage in the job placement, unless you want to become a doctor, a type of engineer, or some kind of legal profession. Anything that's related, you don't really need a degree. And even then, right, if you do want to get in some specific fields, some IT specializations, if you're gonna have to get certificates. So realistically, degrees are not really worth it if money and the job market is what you're seeking.
All right. Money in the job market, not seeing that return on investment. LAR, what is your feeling? Has your feeling changed over time based on, let's say, what you were sold or what you saw being sold regarding this particular track? Get on this track and you will be rewarded. Is the pot of gold still at the end of the rainbow? What do you think, LAR?
Gold candy wrappers. Right now, man, trades are better because it's cheaper. And even though they're trying to raise the price on that, So
Oh, they,
ultimately,
they spotted the increase in demand and they're trying to raise the price on like getting training and like because I know
yeah,
that. Go ahead.
no, go, yeah, they're raising the price on trade school. So they're trying to they're basically going towards the track of making trade school just as expensive as college. So the only difference is it takes less time. So they're working that magic. But to me, I mean, even the businesses are talking about that. Like they'll take certifications over degrees, and they're doing that now. And basically, to be perfectly honest, you probably got too many people with degrees that are dumb on the job, and you got too many people who can't afford school because you know a lot of these schools don't hold as much weight as they do academically anymore. Like, I went to this college or that college. That doesn't mean you're going to get some top tier person. It just means you got an employee that went to a certain place. And unfortunately, I'll say this and shut up. I've learned of a lot of people over the years lying about where they went to school to get a job and really keeping their job afterwards. Some got fired, most kept their job. So that's a whole nother part of the story.
So there are many different paths. Kaizo mentioned that a college degree opens up certain opportunities, but it's definitely not the key to every industry. And as Kaizo mentioned, many things in the service sector, which America, by the way, is now focused on. There's a trade side, right? There's a trade side. But if you're going to be in the offices, it's more like a service economy, right? That's kind of what we do over here. And in there, you need certificates, whether you're going in. So let me let's hear from Dr. Thunder regarding the general sentiment that most degrees are a bad investment in this day and age. What are your sentiments, sir?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm the person on the panel that is supposedly supposed to be most incentivized to suggest that getting a college degree is going to be your best bet. But it is not, and progressively so, it is not. Unless you're getting a degree in a particular, with a particular discipline. So, I'm a music professor. Okay. So, one of the music degrees that I think it is a really safe bet and has high outcome, high placement in the actual job that you want is a Bachelor of Music Education degree. The institution I work at has close to a 100% placement in actual teaching position.
What's the barrier to entry, by the way, in terms of, because if you have 100% placement, that means you're selecting people, I would assume. And that's a part of my question, that you're selecting people rather carefully because you don't have an infinite number of opportunities on the other end to give them.
Right.
So, like, what's the barrier to entry? They got to be good, blah, blah, blah. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, and the program is very rigorous. The Bachelor of Music Education and we'll say jazz studies in most of these institutions around the country are the most credit rich courses in music. So they have the highest number of uh, courses and not just courses but credits, but also music degrees tend to be a lot of courses where you're taking a class for 0.5 or you're taking it for 0, but it's still required for you to graduate, and there's still a lot of time associated with taking the class, right? So and then you have to there's a licensure that you have to qualify for. So just getting through the program, doing your student teaching, getting good evaluations on your student teaching and all that kind of stuff. Just doing that is not enough. You also have to qualify. You have to go through the licensure process. See, so yeah, and it kind of weeds out folks because it's a pretty challenging curriculum. And I'm also going to say that not all schools are going to have a 100% or close to 100% placement. But that gives you an idea of a pretty direct pathway, an example of a pretty direct pathway with the degree. Okay. Now I would argue that there are other the degrees within these conservatory model music schools where there is just not, it's not very likely that you're going to find yourself actually working in an industry. Well, you may be working in the industry, but it may not be related to what your specialization is. And then I'd argue that that's a sort of microcosm, what I've described as sort of microcosm for the university system in general. And you have a lot of these sort of custom degrees that have been designed, and basket weaving plus, and you've got a lot of degrees. Like, what does someone do with a women's study degree other than be an SJW, right? What is it that you do? And even degrees that have a longer standing, like political science, what are you actually going to do with that degree? It seems to me that there's going to be a lot of it's not a direct pathway to a job. Trade schools tend to do a better job of having people that are teaching the courses that are plugged into the actual industry. So they can sort of hand select folks. Well, there's this guy that I'm teaching over at the trade school. He'd be ideal for this position. And there's kind of a direct transfer, it's direct placement. But that's just not necessarily the case in a university system. To be fair, though, and there are different views on this. You have the more, broaden your mind. Going to university is not really about getting a job. It's about broadening your mind, right? So you have that way on one side. And then on the way on the other side is, you're going to college because you're trying to get a better job. And or you're trying to do better than your parents did. Maybe your parents didn't go to college. They say, you're going to college because we want you to be better than us, right? And I think where most people live is somewhere in between those extremes.
Mm-hmm. So, and I'll say a word about the job placement, right? That 100% job placement, which other departments I'm assuming you would recommend should emulate, right? This kind of idea of, okay, in the business school, the School of Business, we have these positions, in the accounting and finance department, there are these particular, degrees or courses or whatever, right? That you go into, you qualify into, and you're going to get a job in this kind of a thing. The expand your mind aspect, the question is, what's the price tag on the expansion of your mind, right? Sure, I want to expand my mind, but this fee is rather hefty. Okay, there's thousands and thousands and tens of thousands per year to expand my mind. And I'm going to be broke without nutrients for my brain cells afterwards, right? What's the point of that? Okay, I need some fat, I need some proteins. God damn it! So, and then there is an aspect which is not and we will get on this when we talk about the status aspects, because there's several things here. We're talking about the money part right now and just giving general sentiments with regards to the investment that you put into education. There's a status as well thing where we know that in certain communities it is better, people, it's respected to have a college degree, generally speaking, in society as well. What you mentioned about getting political science degree, those are kind of like gentlemen's degrees where you go to an Ivy League and you go get your political science degrees, where those things are actually quite rigorous, and you go work for Billy Crystal in some think tank in Washington, right? Because you're already elite and you're already in those circles, right? But not for the average person. The average person getting a political science degree at best can hope to go teach political science, right? That kind of a thing. So, Kaizo, getting back to you, and I know you said you can't stay the whole time, but don't fall asleep on us. Now, it is still the case, however, that college graduates enjoy higher earnings on average, right, than non-college graduates. And the difference is 68%. the median wage earner, if you have a college degree, the median wage earner earns about 1,400, and for a high school dropout, it's only 850. Now, I think that, and I want to see what you think about this, and maybe you can expand on it. That there are a couple of things that are kind of wrong with this. Number one, earnings is true, but then they're in debt, right? It's like, yeah, you're earning 68% more, but you're saddled with debt, and debt is not just like a zero sum thing. In other words, you can't just look at the amount of the debt. Starting off with debt can drag your ability to compound and grow, right? It stifles you in a certain regard. And there's a self-selection aspect. In other words, that this self-selected group of people that go to college are probably more likely to succeed regardless. So this college was just a detour for them, right? They just spent an expensive detour on their road to succeeding anyways. So, Kaiser, what are your thoughts about the fact that they still earn more, right? They still earn 68% more. And maybe you can add more nuance regarding what parents should then be telling their children, as opposed to just follow the NPC. This is a track, just do this. This is the simple recipe. So what are your thoughts about what I just said? There's still a difference of 68%. I think there's some self-selection going on, and I think that the debt needs to be taken into account when you're talking about this higher earnings. What are your thoughts, guys?
Yeah. So let me start by.
Oh, wait, hold on.
mentioning-
So 1 second. Shout out to the super chat before I forget. Sorry. Right. JT Coin Rings also came in the building. Thank you very much. Says, hello, Ike, panel, and chat. 100. And thank you very much again. Go ahead, Kaizo.
I always find it interesting. How come it's always 100? How come it's not 95% or something?
Yeah, you know,
realistic.
something more realistic. It's always 100.
Right.
Go ahead. 100%
Yeah,
on everything. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. So I will say this. Yes, obviously debt has to be taken into account, and if you do remove debt, and also if you select for people that purposely did not go to university but had the so-called qualifying markers to go to university, I'm sure those people's numbers will not be so off. Meaning, a university is already, as you mentioned, it's a self-selecting criteria, right? People that tend to go to university, on average, tend to have 15 points of IQ higher than those who don't go to university. So it is a self-selecting group of slightly high IQ. Whatever IQ it measures, determines, or predicts, that is a reality. So what we're having though now is not really the same market, right? What we're having is people deciding not to go to university on purpose, not because you know school was boring or hard, but because they're seeing that the extra amount of debt and also time that they can actually put into something that's more profitable in real time is definitely a factor for them to consider. So I would say debt, definitely take that into account. Also self-selection, 15 points IQ higher in a system that they believed would work, right? I'm talking about the boomer generation, etc. For them, school actually worked. Right now, it doesn't.
Indeed. Yes. Thank you for adding the 15% higher IQ thing. Obviously, I was making the argument that generally the self-selected group, you added some numbers to it. And then it'll be interesting to see, because we know that IQ has a correlation with increased, the direct proportionality with increased income, right? So it's like, okay, is this 15 points higher IQ worth this 68% increase? Is there a match on that other study? And in that case, it's like, well, it wasn't the college. You just saddled this particular people with debt. You slowed them down, as a matter of fact. Now, LER, let's talk about this kind of advice, a change in advice, a change in direction. You talked about, hey, you said the trades, that's the way to go. So with regards to parents, from your experience, friends, family, nieces, nephews, things that you have seen, is this conversation changing? Or how should it be changing in your mind with regards to giving advice to people and guiding them, right? Like, hey, everybody says they're going to college, right? This particular kid says, hey, all my friends going to college. You have to have a degree, right? Otherwise you're a dusty. What do you say, LAR?
Man, this younger generation is quite interesting, because I know kids who went to college and dropped, and I know more than a few kids who went to college and dropped out because they thought they were going to be social media influencers. So
Mr. Beast.
I know kids who went to the military, but they can't handle it. Now they're out of the military. They're like, I don't know how to be an adult. For these younger generations, a lot of their issue is they can't handle adversity. I don't have a problem with college, but if you know what you're getting into, you know, the cheaper route that can get you the same amount of money would be trades. But interestingly enough, I think their issue ultimately is they don't want to work in general. So it's hard to like to get them to go to school and stay. Like I don't know what happened over the years, but the laziness has definitely hit a sky high. And some of these companies, it's hard for me to tell them stuff because what I've seen in the workforce is younger people get into the workforce and they're on the precipice of getting fired. So even if you go to college and even if you go to trade school, are you going to finish is one thing. And two, are you going to be consistent in work is another thing. And because of social media and the internet, people think they could just finesse their way through life, and they're having a hard time. I say trades, but I just say their work ethic sucks.
The work ethic sucks. Now, two things to highlight there with regards to what you said. Number one is the sticking to it, that grit, picking a path and sticking with it. It's about like 90% of your success depends on that sticking to it. In several kinds of fields that I've dabbled in, I've seen this thing happen over and over again, right? And if I may just kind of drop a simple anecdote here, right? So, back in the day, playing with, just right after college, playing with a band, right? And, there's this particular bass player, right? Shout out to him. He's pretty good. He has the degrees and everything. And he's talking about, playing in this pool party, backyard party, right? Like, oh, come on, we should be playing at this place, at that place, or the other, whatever, right? And the thing is, like, a year and a half later, we're playing at that place, right? At the House of Blues, but he's not there, right? This happens in different kinds of arenas where people don't stick to things and they're not there when, the break finally happens. So sticking to things we'll get to shortly, but I want you to react to something, Dr. Thunder, that LER said, and then also address this idea of how to change the advice and guidance that you give to children. Well, you mentioned the generation thing. Now, I'm like, millennial, right? And I've heard all kinds of things about millennials, right? Like, oh, now it's Gen Z that's horrible, right? But we were the whipping boys for a while, right? And I tend to disbelieve. I think the incentive structures change in societies and people kind of respond. But millennials are supposedly lazy. I don't know what you think about this, what your experience is with regards to this generation thing. You can pick on millennials specifically or not. So one of the things that LAR mentioned is, we were lacking grit in particular generations. But go ahead, Dr. Thunder.
Yeah, so I think there is something to the whole, sort of change, generational change, different standards. It's not just about new slang speech, where older generations try to use it, that slang, and it always feels and sounds weird. But I do think that there is a bigger expectation. There's a bigger expectation. What am I saying? It's more common for there to be issues with follow through. Now, I actually think that mostly where that comes from is maybe not an inherent laziness, but too many options. So let me give you an example. So I'm a Gen X. I'm 49. And so there was a lot of technology that did not exist. There was no YouTube. There was no, ability to easily slow stuff down. I mean, you could do the thing with a record player where you can slow the record player speed down to half, and then that would cut in half the speed of the music, so then you could hear it. But there just wasn't as many, like technology wasn't just ever present and so easy to access. Even stuff like having a rhythm section to play along with, like a backing track. You know, when I was young, that really didn't exist like it does now. Now you can buy a $15 app, and that app has a dynamic rhythm section where you can just change chord symbols, and you can change the style, the speed. You can tell it to transpose every time it goes through one time, and you can get this app for like $10. And then you go to a forum online and you can download 1,400 pre-programmed songs for it for free. Okay. If I was going to do that, I would have had to do each individual one of those myself. So I just think that because so much stuff is already there for you, I think what it does is it I think it makes it harder for folks to commit to stuff. So let me say this last thing. In particular, access to music. Okay, recorded music. So when I was coming up, we had records, then we had cassettes, and we had CDs, right? And so that stuff would have been stuff that was within the range where I was really learning music. And before sort of file sharing and all of the rest of that, and YouTube, where almost everything that's ever been recorded is available in some streaming platform or something, and or just for free, I had to actually pay for a record. So when you pay for something, you have more skin in the game. And when there are when there's less music available, less stuff has been recorded, less high quality stuff that's been recorded, then you're going to really appreciate that recording that you bought, those few recordings that are at a particular level. And so I would play those over and over and over. And so that made me have a lot of depth in a really specified thing. Whereas today, there's so much music available that when you ask a student, when I ask one of my students, well, what do you like? Who are you listening to? Oh, I really like this kind of music, or I really like that kind of music. Okay, name me one record. Name me an artist. Tell me something about the instrumentation, that particular artist tends to use. Tell me something about, they can't do it because it's a bunch of surface level listening. They listen to all of this different stuff and they have access to everything, but there is not this sort of really depth, because all I had was this one record. So I know that record like the back of my hand. Now, the benefit of technology in my mind, especially for musicians, really primarily goes to those that were old enough that they had to do it the original way. They didn't have access all to that. So they developed discipline, appreciation of what it is that they had, but then continued to learn technology as things developed. So I still have an appreciation of music, and I still really highly value what I think is high quality, and I'll spend the time doing what's necessary because I developed that discipline. But I also have the same access to what everybody else has access to. So anyhow, that's a roundabout way to express that.
So there's typically people at the edge of a generation or the edge of a particular change where they experience one side, let's say the analog world, and then they move into the digital world. Those people tend to have an advantage, obviously, right? So that's one aspect of the generational stuff. LAR brought up the grit example, which we'll get to in the future. But Kaizo, we're still talking about the utility of the college degree, right? I'm going to want you to talk a little bit about the status aspect of things after, ladies and gentlemen, we acknowledge the super chats, right? Shout out to Dottie Galdem blessing us with a super sticker worth $10. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Shout out to one man, Lazy Ute, he says, with the £2. That's a little over $2. And that's much appreciated. And then he comes back again with another £2. Yes, 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 yes. He says, yes. What are you saying? Okay. Sure. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Okay, so Kaizo, another aspect of what education does is, it has this kind of a status aspect, right? So there is status that a college degree bestows upon you, and there's some communities where it's very important, where it's like, oh, you mean you only have a high school degree? Now, how do you kind of how does one replace that status? I'll give an example of an institution, for example. There's something called the Teal Fellowship, created by this guy called Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is a technology entrepreneur and investor. And the Teal Fellowship is like a 2-year program where young people are asked to leave college or drop out or don't go to college, just skip college. Here's $100,000, right? $100,000 grant. And then they get access to the Teal Foundation's network of founders, inventors, scientists, and whatnot. And the particular certificate that you get is valuable in these circles. You're trying to be in the circle of an inventor, a founder, a business person, someone who has an idea that cannot wait, needs to be birthed right now. So skip college. Here's $100,000. Here's a network. Let's build something, and it is respected. You get a certificate. That's an example of a way to kind of funnel a particular type of person from avoiding the whole kind of a college thing. But what are your thoughts about status? Right? Is it just going to fade away? Are people going to change, or is there some other way to exude the status, right? In a way where in a interpersonal interaction with someone else, they can't even tell the difference. And if you end up telling this person, "Hey, I didn't go to college," it wouldn't even matter anymore. What are your thoughts about all that, Kaizo?
Yeah, so I think status will never go away. But what we do have is a system that actually adapts to the current scenario. So a simple example is selectivity and exclusivity. So as you mentioned with the Thiel Foundation, right? You're giving these people access to something that not everybody has a chance to. They're highly selective, and that already kind of creates its own reputation. And of course, as these people, with this 100,000 grant, are able to now work with founders and other scientists, they're able to explore creativity as well as getting directly linked into a company so that they can start showing value immediately. There isn't all that indoctrination, through socialization in colleges, which right now, as Dr. Thunder would say, is going against any sort of principle that they should be teaching, right? In colleges, you should be being taught critical thinking and things of that nature, but instead there's an ideology. So actually, status will still maintain itself because of the fact that it's selective, highly selective, and exclusive. Now, in other contexts as well, money is always a big factor to things. And as long as you're able to kind of accrue money, you will still have status. But the final part of status is this, right? Think of it this way: tech jobs. Everyone these days on YouTube or everywhere else online, you can kind of see self-taught programmers versus the ones that went to a boot camp, like a 3-month course where every day 10 hours plus coding, and then in 3 months you're qualified to get a entry-level job. These people already have a high status because everyone knows that everyone can't be a programmer for whatever reason, whether it's discipline or maybe it's a little bit more intellectually demanding than some other jobs. It doesn't even matter. Exclusivity there, selectivity, and also if you wrap it all up in money, I think that's enough to kind of create the new social status.
Well said. Yes. So the Teal Foundation, as you gave as an example, they select people, right? So there's exclusivity there, and you can say, "Hey, I was a Teal Fellow of 2021. I was part of that particular group, and I've also done X, Y, and Z." And yeah, the proof is in the pudding in the sense that I'm successful financially also. So by that point, no one is talking about whether or not you have a degree or not. But LAR, what do you say, right? Now, a lot of the reason why, a lot of status goes into also mate selection, right? So it's a question of, okay, well, do women really care if this guy has a degree or if he has money? No, that's one measure of the ways in which the status associated with college degrees are embedded in certain communities or not. But what are your thoughts regarding replacing status? Kaiser gave us a framework regarding, hey, you have to still go into some kind of a channel where there's selectivity, exclusivity, you make something out of yourself by applying those things such as grit, picking a path and sticking to it. And at that point, you already got your status. And something also you mentioned about, let's say, the wanting to be an influencer, right? For those who are successful in this influencing game or whatever new game people are trying to play on Instagram, there is no question about whether or not PewDiePie or Mr. Beast has a degree, right? So what are your thoughts here about the status that college bestows and how it might be replaced with in some other way if you don't go to college?
I would say success is the highest status. Sometimes people get in positions and they feel like the position gives them status, but not if they're standing next to somebody more successful. At the end of the day, I would say the goal is actually to be excellent at something, because with excellence brings status. But we're living in a society where excellence is part of microwave culture. So if it's not overnight excellence, then it's not worth actually pursuing. So now, I mean, same thing with the internet. A bunch of us are on the internet. Only a few of us are successful. And the interesting thing about that is, and when I even using the internet as a reference, I hate to say it, but when you see who's successful on the internet, sometimes you have to question with the direction of society. Because what society is actually involved in and locked in at engaging with, 80% of that stuff is really idiotic. So it doesn't bode well for the future of the country, not just this country, but of the rest of the world. But for me, I think if I think the internet gave people a better delusion that you can be successful overnight, and it ruined the actual idea of having a dream and actually grinding until you achieve it. So now it's just people just quit and just do anything else. And it's the same thing that you saw in the workforce, where people were always quitting. I'm gonna get another job. I'm gonna get another job. I'm gonna get another job. And now you can't get another job for most people. So, and even in that process, a person's status changed. So you go from position to position to position, to status to status to status, to ultimately, unfortunately, unemployed or laid off. What's the status in that?
Where's the status in that? Indeed. So let me go ahead and read a couple of some things from the chat here. Then we'll move on to you, Dr. Thunder. We're still talking about status, the status bestowed upon you in the eyes of others, right? By having this college degree. So if your son, or some relative is saying, "Hey, am I not going to just be a loser if I just have only high school diploma?" What do you say about that? But anyways, Ra L says, degree is what you get when you want to work for others. Trade is what you get, okay, when you want to do the other thing, when you want to cultivate ownership, get to the money quicker, get to that business quicker. However, Ellie already pointed out that there's one critical aspect of the business thing, which we'll get to when we talk about this lack of grit, or what the grit is, learning about money, learning about how to use sweat equity to build value, and then leveraging that value somehow, and then creating something whereby you can leverage other people's labor and rinse and repeat, right? And Mr. Adult Swim here says, not Adult Swim, Adult Supervision, says, agreed, status is always a factor in social relations. Degrees are useful if appropriately priced. And this is something that we've talked about You can talk about expanding your mind if you're not getting the degree that's particularly useful with regards to income. But what's the cost of expanding your mind? And can you not expand your mind on these free courses on YouTube, for example, right? But shout out to you, Dr. Thunder. Okay, we're talking about how to replace the status, right? How do you kind of how do you bridge that gap? Is it even a necessary gap to bridge? Does it matter? Why don't you say F it, F the status? Let's get to the discipline and get to the money. What are your thoughts about the status thing associated with college degrees?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe this will seem strange to folks. You know, if I could have the job that I have without the degree, I wouldn't have gotten the degree. The degrees, but if they weren't necessary to get me my foot in the door, I wouldn't have done it. I think the value of degrees, in my estimation, should be more about a particular outcome. It shouldn't just be based on broadening the mind. There's too many ways that you can broaden your mind. Okay, now they may not garner the same level of prestige, right? You know, people, you know, there's a reason why on these sort of commercials that if you really want people to trust, you know, what the commercial is saying, then you'll have some folks in white lab coats, you know, and then somehow people trust it. And the reason that is because, okay, the implication is they're educated, they got degrees, and they've been certified in a certain way. And so then therefore they're more authoritative, so we can really trust what it is they're saying. Now, of course, they're just actors, and none of that is actually true, but it's playing on that sort of structure that we have developed, that sort of bias towards folks that seem to be educated, right? It's not just about intelligence. It's someone else saying, okay, well, you're smart enough to get through my program, you know. And so we've put a lot of credibility on that. A problem that arises is this sort of plead to authority, that I think it's very hard for people to know that that's what they're doing much of the time. Now, you would expect, if your education is in a particular discipline, for you to be more knowledgeable, perhaps, in that discipline, and maybe the information that you produce to be more reliable in that discipline, right? Certainly, because someone has a doctorate does not mean that they're experts in everything, right? But because you have a doctorate does not necessarily mean that you are particularly adept at the thing that you got the degree in. And you have to take it on an individual basis, and really the responsibility is still on the individual, right? And you have to evaluate the arguments in the information being produced, not just, hey, this person has a degree, so I'm just going to listen to what they have to say. Okay, so in that way, I'm probably different than a lot of folks that have the kind of job that I have, because the game in academia is degrees, and so that is how, you know, that is how many decisions are made, is based on credentials. We're producing credentials. We want you to have a credential, you know, or whatever these credentials are. You know, those credentials, they cause our institution to have more credibility, X, Y, and Z. and then there are those that the expectation is for you to stay in your lane, as it were. Well, you're a doctorate in, I don't know, sociology, or you're a doctorate in, name the discipline. So then you should be locked into whatever that discipline is, and that's just not the way that it works. Most folks, during the time that they're getting their degrees, are not aware of most things that they'll encounter, during the course of their life, and they may change their mind about a large array of things. Right? They may change their mind, and or they may have spent many more hours studying something that is not related to the degree that they got. Right? There used to be a place for lay scholars, folks that they didn't get a degree, but they're super knowledgeable. They know as much or more than any degreed person knows on a particular topic. But yeah, so I think you have to be careful with the way that whole thing works. Yeah, I'm not sure that I answered your question, but
Well, you did say that you don't necessarily hold that the degree itself is the thing. You're more on the excellence side of things. Like, I'm going to be excellent at something. And also, by the way, I want this other type of job over here. I'm a teacher type, and it requires these degrees. Okay, cool. So let me go ahead and get it, right? On the status end here, this particular comment here by LOM here says, getting to the money, right? Which, by the way, if you kind of imagine this particular person in this economic environment that we're in, where these college graduates are working at Chipotle. So LOM rolls up to Chipotle with his, Dodge Viper, Hennessy, whatever it is, what is it? The LAR will correct me. I don't know if it's the Challenger or I forget the name, the car, Hellcat. LOM pulls up with his Hellcat to Chipotle. He's looking fresh. He's directing things. He's making a good income, but way better than all these other people. At some point, what's this whole "did you get a college degree or not" thing, right? The college degree person is.
You want a high income, just start an OnlyFans.
Woohoo! There you go. There you go. Buttholes are us. Anyways.
The Dusty Network.
So shout out. Kaizo, let's move on to something else, which is about this kind of socialization, right? Because again, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the value of education. We're saying, hey, trades versus college when it comes to money, power, status, right? And we talked about the fact that, look, 56% of Americans are saying that college degrees are not worth it. They point out to high time investment, high college tuition, leaving you in debt. However, there is still a pay gap, in the sense that college graduates still enjoy higher earnings. We looked at the fact that maybe it's just a self-selecting thing. These people have higher IQs that tend to go to college, so they would have been successful anyways without saddling themselves with this debt. And then we talked about status. But now let's move on to, what do you think people mean by this socialization and acculturation process that's supposed to go on at universities, right? It is part of the expanding your mind aspect, but it is different in the sense that it's not the expanding your mind in isolation, right? You have to be part of this group. You have to meet these different people, and you're going to be socialized and acculturated. And there are some practical benefits that come from this in terms of network building and whatnot. Can you kind of just lay down what you think the value is, the utility is, that people are trying to describe when they talk about this socialization and acculturation? Is it something that's unique to college campuses? Are there not other ways to achieve this kind of socialization and acculturation of people? What are your thoughts, Kaizo? Are you muted?
Yeah, so no, I'm here. Yeah, so okay. When it comes to socializations, obviously there's a lot of different factors. One factor over here is historical factor. So SI, what is the history in your culture of the things that are seen as high status versus the reality on the ground? And of course, there's always a lag space around it. In Kenya, for example, educated class tend, our parents, right, were the first class to actually basically utilize education to get the best jobs and sort of push themselves into the areas in the economy that allowed them to invest, build houses, maybe high-rise apartments, etc. Education did that because more or less at that time, when Kenya was more or less being colonized, the educated class were able to leverage all of that. However, now because of saturation and everything, what's going on is actually people are realizing business tribes are actually doing better, not necessarily the educated tribes. Now, what that means is, status-wise, there was a lag space, like in the last 10, 15 years, whereby, if you didn't go to school or something, and by school I mean like higher education, you were kind of seen as stupid, actually. I remember there was literally a time when mechanics were seen as low class in Kenya until they realized they're making more money than the person with a degree in finance, business, or even accounting. So what's happened now, at least over here, is that people are realizing money is what speaks. The status in Kenya, at least, is actually definitely around money and no longer around the education sort of status. However, even if that's the case, titles do matter. Meaning, whatever game you're playing in the environment that you're in, whatever social order you're part of, if you can play that game at the highest level and get some kind of accreditation for it, so whether titles or otherwise, that definitely helps. But generally speaking, when it comes to socialization, it is based on the games. There is a lag time between one generation to the next. However, as I see it, going on in America, the UK, and everywhere else in the world, people these days, especially the kids, as one of us mentioned earlier, everyone wants to become an influencer. Everyone wants to become a rich YouTuber. So status now is not necessarily on what did you do to get there, but are you there or not? AKA what LAR said. Can't believe I'm agreeing with him. Success is the ultimate status.
Success is the ultimate status. Success is the ultimate arbiter. Okay. So one example of the lag that you mentioned is there's like a whole generation of people that continue to go into finance thinking that they're going to be Gordon Gekko. You know what I'm saying, LAR? They don't understand that the Gordon Gekko days are long gone. Some of the particulars about this have to do with technology. That's a big thing. The ability of people to now trade by themselves. First of all, there was the creation of what they call indexes, that would just make it easy for you to just buy a percentage of a whole broad swath of companies. The S&P 500, for example, is such an index. And you have ETFs that are other kind of smaller versions of these kind of indices, exchange traded funds that people can kind of do by themselves. The fee structure greatly dropped in this whole industry, right? Greatly, but people still were passing their cards around, talking about being an investment banker all over Wall Street. But these people are broke, okay? But like 2 generations still went in trying to be Gordon Gekko, but that shit died in the 80s. So that's just an example there. So LAR, what are your thoughts about what people, have you heard this thing about socialization being key? I gotta go to the HBCUs and become a hoe. And that's a critical part of my development in life, socialization and acculturation. What are your thoughts about that?
That's cold-blooded. The socialization becomes interesting for one reason to me. I think us as an American society have seen too many educated, successful people go broke. We've seen too many companies of educated, successful people go broke. We've seen too many people get bailed out, like in finance and in the auto industry. You get what I'm saying? We've seen too many of our favorite quote unquote entertainers go broke. So when it comes to like money, the country is broke. We don't look at financial literacy like people think we do. So now it's like, go to college, get an education, go to trade school, get a trade, work, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But as you said earlier about pulling up with the Hellcat to Chipotle. We have a young mentality as far as success and finances go. I want to be rich so I can show off to strangers. And just like, I don't know if that, what was it, 42% of people, something like that this year are going to get their cars repoed. That's going to be a lot of Hellcats. So if school's making you broke, and I hate to say it, like you said, you can go to school to be a hoe, be somebody, be a hoe, and even hoes going broke. That's why you see hoes out here looking for another dude, and that hopefully he's a baller and he got the bag and he'll give them some more money because they're going broke too. This the first world idea is broke. People don't realize it, but like, we're living in a country where you probably can't afford a new car. The average new car is like $42,000. I'm gonna leave it alone.
Yes, yes, sir. Directly tied to the financialization of everything, right? So you have a company with a massive type of valuation. Most of that is just created by credit. People also having cars and homes created by credit. There's certain other places in the world where you see someone driving a car, they paid cash. Their house, they paid cash, right? And it's a different mentality. Now, overall, they're kind of going to live a slightly lower level of standard of living. They're not going to have the iPhone 14 because they have to pay cash for it. But generally speaking, they're free in this regard. Now, Lion Legal, how's the microphone doing, sir? Welcome. Microphone check. Lion Legal, you there?
You got line too.
Yes. Can you hear me? Sorry about that.
Yeah. No problem. So I want to give you a quick kind of what is your sentiment to this particular statement here? 80% of college degrees are a bad investment. What do you say about that in 30 seconds? And then I'll ask you another question.
80% are a bad investment. I would say no. I think that university is incredibly important because not only is it a place where people can gain academic understanding, but it's also for socialization. The real issue is the cost of the education, and the cost is prohibitively high. So that is why people think it's a bad investment. I don't think it's simply the process of going to university.
So maybe should I ask you to adjust your answer then? Because if we look at the investment aspect, which is what the question centers on, if the cost is too high for this socialization, then that is one way of defining bad investment, right? It's not like maybe the output is still there, but it's just prohibitively high, as you said, right?
Yes, but I think it's a little bit more complicated because I would actually advocate or state that education is a right and people are being prevented from getting a right. For example, in the Constitution, if people say that, essentially, for example, you would have to pay a fine in order to say what you felt and not be arrested by the government, then there might be an argument that the cost is too high for free speech. But the argument really is that free speech is a right and there should be no associated cost with it in the first place, if you see my point.
Mhm. So this socialization that you're talking about, which is the point that we're on, which is the very question that we're on at this point, what exactly does it look like? What is the value of this socialization? Can you kind of enlighten me as to, okay, well, the person that did not go to this college and get this kind of socialization or culturation versus someone else, is there a way for this person who did not go to college to simulate the experience and gain those same things that will lead them to the money and the status? What does this acculturation and socialization actually look like in college?
Okay, I will give you an example. There's a person called Chris Langen who apparently has one of the highest IQs in the world. He has a tested IQ of around 195 to 200, when the average IQ is probably 100 points less than that. He did not go to university. He went for, I think, a year, dropped out. It doesn't really, well, he doesn't have a PhD. So for him to speak with intellectuals is going to be difficult, by his own admission, because he says that they don't respect the fact that he doesn't have the qualifications that they have. When you go into college and you are socialized, one of the things that you have to do in order to set yourself apart from the pack, in order to get your degree, you have to go through testing. A lot of people can be intelligent, read of their own accord. They can be autodidactic. I think that's the term for it, whereby you learn of your own accord. But the problem is that you don't test your knowledge. And people that simply study by themselves, they can come unstuck when they're against people that have been through the gauntlet of having to take several different exams, having to get peer reviewed on articles, having to actually debate issues with other highly intelligent people. For example, if you look at people like Destiny, who is a streamer, etc., some people think that he is, intelligent or exposed. But if you actually listen to what he says, anytime he's against individuals who have been through that, academic experience, they illuminate the gaps in his knowledge. So yes, I know that university gets a bad rap. It's seen as needless, but I think that it does a lot of good if you're talking about truly understanding the depths of a particular academic discipline. You get a lot from going to university. I truly believe that.
All right. Good submission, as they say in some circles, right? So, Dr. Thunder, we're still on this socialization, acculturation. It is tied to an aspect of creating value, which is a question of the money. I mean, the networks, right? The networks which bring the money. But other than that, I struggle to see why. Just from a just so again, let me give my kind of bias here. I'm a STEM guy, right? And I didn't go to college for socialization, and there was not much socialization going on in STEM. Yes, you find these networks of the people whom are good at what they are good at, but I think that STEM, but generally speaking, is one of those that is not considered to be a bad investment, in the sense that I mean, it's just on that end of the continuum. But so I have a bias with regards to socialization, acculturation, and whatever the hell this school spirit nonsense these people are doing, right? But Dr. Thunder, what's your idea? You're out there, you're in academia, you're in Ohio State. What's going on? What are you guys doing? What is the Ohio State University doing to acculturate these unwashed students and making them into refined, cultured human beings, sir? What do you say?
Well, I mean, I'll talk about academia in general. So here's there's several issues, and there's assumptions that get made about what's actually happening in the academy, and I think there's a lot of benefit of the doubt that's given. My estimation. So first of all, I don't think that education is a right. Now, I would argue that in the Constitution, we get an education at least through high school that they provide, and it's legal not to have your kids go to school. Beyond high school, there is no right to education. Education is a privilege, always has been. The moment you treat it like a right, you end up with many of the dynamics that we have today in society, where you have a lot of folks that are getting cranked out of these institutions, and a lot of students actually that are dictating to their professors how their education, what it is to their liking that they'd like their education to be. Okay, you end up with these sort of dynamics. It's not a right. It is a it is a privilege to be educated. And I mean, and it's by grace, honestly, that folks even have an opportunity to be educated beyond a certain level. But we sort of normalized an aspect of that, which sort of eliminates the sort of seriousness that the average person approaches education with. At least with an autodidact, they have such a love of the knowledge that even with no one looking, and even with no benefit of prestige or anything else that's going to happen associated with them getting that piece of paper, they're doing it for, it seems to me, for the purest intentions. I'm also not convinced that a person that learned outside of the institution is going to somehow be limited as far as their ability to have conversations with folks from inside the institution. Any limitation would occur due to whatever bias the people from the institution had. It wouldn't be because he didn't have the necessary tools to be able to communicate, because all that stuff can be found in books. I mean, that's what these institutions are. They are largely curatorial. They are not involved in cutting edge. That's not what these institutions do. Other folks, usually people that in many cases, people that didn't go to college, they sort of establish what the new stuff is, and then the institutions of higher learning, they're involved in curating, in keeping, categorizing things, keeping things, say, what do I want to say, organized, right? And finding ways to teach about things that have happened in the past. These universities are not involved in, usually are not involved in creating new information, only keeping track of the information that's been produced. And you could say, well, wait a minute, what's the point of a PhD? Isn't that about new information, new knowledge? A degree of it is, an aspect of it is. And I would argue that that's probably an outlier with respect to what usually is happening in these institutions. Yeah, so I don't think that, I think if you actually have intelligence, and I think that if you actually have a skill, regardless as to how you acquired the skill, whatever the least expensive way to acquire that, it seems to me that should be what it is that you do. And I agree with Lion Legal that one of the primary issues with the education system now is the cost of the degree. So it is possible and likely to be able to find many ways to acquire the same information at a much lower cost. At a much lower cost. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I would like to respond to that because I think he responded to some points I made.
Go ahead.
All right. So first of all, I said that in my view, it should be a right. I didn't say it's a constitutional right. I mean, I've read the Constitution, so obviously I would not make that mistake. And it is, in my view, a right because you look at countries where there are dictatorships. A lot of times, there's widespread illiteracy that allows an autocratic regime to take over the country. It improves the economy, lowers the crime rate, improves the living conditions of people when individuals in that country are literate, meaning educated. That's number one. Number two, I didn't say that people that have not had an education or been through the higher education system are not able to converse about academic topics. I said that in order for them to be given a lot of the same status or prestige that an individual with a PhD has, they would have to have that same degree. However, one thing that education does, which you cannot get as an autodidact, is that it tests you. You have to go through certain testing. You have to go through peer reviews. You have to do several different things to test your theories, and to test your understanding, and to ensure that you have a certain level of understanding. Now, the problem with education and books in general is that they're constantly looking at historic narratives. A book can't tell you how to build or how to code and build a technological platform that does not exist. Okay, so they can't tell you those things. They can only look at the past. So that is a problem, and that is what you're not going to get from education. That's why a lot of education is not geared towards entrepreneurialism. It's rather geared towards having people work for companies, etc. But I think that you misunderstood some of the points I made.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I misunderstood. I think you changed a couple of the points, at least slightly.
Which one?
But well, you changed the point. I mean, you definitely said that with respect to education, you think that education is a right.
Yes, absolutely. I think I feel that
No, I
education
don't have.
is a right. Yes.
Now, hold up. I don't. In the point that you made about other countries and a lot of illiteracy and a benefit to the economy through education. So I'm in agreement that some base level of education is beneficial, but what it is that we're centering around is higher education. And so if we can say, okay, everybody is getting through 12th grade where, yeah, they can read and they can do a lot of things. They understand a lot of things, right? Civics, they understand mathematics, at least to a certain extent. They can, form good sentences. They understand how to write in a clear fashion. Of course, this depends on what school you went to, because all these schools are not equal, K through 12. But so I wouldn't have an issue with that. My point is more about what are the actual benefits of academia, and I'd also argue that there are many places where you can test your knowledge outside of the outside of academia. There are many places where you can do so.
Let's go there, Dr. Thunder, because that is the next place which we're going to land. In other words, there is a real world, real money, power, and success to be had there. And that is the real game in which they're going to be winners and losers, in which you test your actual stuff. Now, with regards to testing, and I'm going to, don't mean to cut you guys off here, but the general idea of there's some places where education, quote unquote, could be seen as a right, but because of the ways in which they test you and segregate, it's going to just pan out anyways that actually fewer people are going to go to school, higher education, than what is done in the United States, for example, where it's just like, here's a loan, go, right? In Germany, no, you're going to be funneled to the right spots, apprenticeship wise and whatnot, and only the cream of the crop get to go to certain places, even though from our standard, it's free, it's next to free, right? That kind of a thing. So that I think is a kind of good encapsulation of the areas that you guys are talking about. But with regards to this testing thing, and when Lion Legal mentioned it, I was like, okay, cool. And because we have talked about these types of things before, we expect people to go out into the world, okay, with a set of tools, discipline, picking a path, sticking to that path, making and keeping money, understanding power, having the stoicism, forming connections, building value, all that stuff, right? Which is the real test. And that's where I would like to kind of get this last round on here. Okay, because whether you go blue collar or white collar, at the end of the day, this is about rather practical success, right? So starting with Kaizo, and then we'll go around. Okay, Kaizo, if you're still there, how can you learn about discipline? Because there is an aspect of forcing somebody into college and being tested, as Lion Legal said, to kind of, install a certain amount of discipline in them and sticking to a path and whatnot. But what do you have to say in general about the main tricks of the trade here with regards to success? The discipline, picking the path, sticking to it, the stoicism, the forming of networks, the creating value, the not being short-sighted, picking up pennies, on a train track and getting run over. So this is more general advice with regards to success of a man out here in this cold world, Kaizo. What do you have to say?
Yeah, so great question. Also, it's a slight response to Lion Legal. So I am actually aware of the guy you're mentioning, right? The guy with the 200 IQ.
Yeah. He has theories of everything, and he's that logic guy
Right.
that
And
doesn't use mathematical symbolisms and whatnot.
right, and this is actually very relevant. That guy, unfortunately, he just created his own syllogisms, right? He created his own math that doesn't make sense to anyone else, and that's part of the problem. He didn't standardize himself to the actual math that already exists. Meaning, because for example, in mathematics, right, or any science field, you actually any field at all, you can actually just go write a research paper. If it's good enough, people will publish it. It's irrelevant. Like I published my first paper in science before I had a degree, so anyone can do it. So I think the issue with people like that, and this answering a question, like, is you need discipline, right? It doesn't even. I will say this again. I would not recommend on doing a course in gender studies or African studies or witchcraft. There's all sorts of cases like this. I don't recommend that. Like, go find a witch doctor if you want to become a witch doctor. Right. Go find a real witch doctor in some jungle in Africa somewhere and go study under him or her or something, right? But the certain courses I wouldn't recommend if it's economics, right? Because it's not going to benefit you in any sort of real time or even mid time, perhaps long time, depending on the chaos, right? So I would say this, right? Doesn't matter what you do, just choose something relatively wise and stick to it, right? Discipline. I mean, all these things are conscientiousness, industriousness. These are what makes people successful, right? Because even if you look at the whole IQ is only one factor. I think it's like 60% why people are successful, which is still significant. But the rest of it is conscientiousness, right? And industriousness. And conscientiousness is basically how well are you at keeping to your word? Like, are you going to do what you said you're going to do? And industriousness is just you pulling yourself by the bootstrap, like just saying, okay, I have to do this. So when it comes to success in this world, I'll leave it there. Go out there, conquer the world, but first conquer your mind, right? Have some basic sensory clarity, and then go on, be disciplined. That's all that matters. From my experience, that's it.
All right. Conscientiousness and industriousness, part of the big 5 kind of psychological parameters that can be measured. Are you going to do what you said you're going to do? And are you actually going to pull through, follow through, and stick to it, right? And you mentioned there, let me just mention my whole kind of life is a use it or lose it proposition, right? Life is not about comfort, growth, expansion, and the good life that is not about comfort. And when we say life, we generally mean the good life. We don't mean the rotting, little flower that barely is crooked and dies before its time type of life. And that type of life is created by comfort. Go ahead, live a life of 100% comfort where you're in bubble wrap on a couch, laid down, then, being fed your favorite syrup, watching Netflix all day. It's going to be a horrible state after a year, as opposed to going out there, challenging yourself, working those muscles, working those brain cells, working those networks, getting tested in the real field, right? And being conscientious and industrious. That is what success requires. So LAR, and then we'll go to Lion Legal. Points here on this, how you actually get tested. What is the real thing? Think of it as giving some kid advice. Like, look, here's what really matters, whether you go blue collar or white collar, right? And you've said, hey, I would prefer that they go to the trades, get to the money quicker and whatnot. What are these main things in order to avoid that lack of grit, which you said that is kind of prevalent in a particular generation? What are you going to tell this kid with regards to success? Go ahead.
Know that you're going to suffer because you started from the bottom. Make smart decisions. Don't expect family and friends to bail you out if things go south. don't live in the ideal that the society is actually going to work in your best interest to make you successful. People lie. People in high positions can get paid to screw you over. Enjoy your life and be young, but do not invest in partying. And or not just partying, fashion, whatever you want to call it. Learn to be hands-on and do things yourself. And probably the most important thing I would say is don't make dangerous decisions because you think you're young and you got time.
There you go. Let me acknowledge a couple of super chats real quick. Shout out to Ja Zola in the building. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. With $9.99, right? $9.99 and 1 cent for Apple. Yes, one man. Yes, one man. I will do what I said I would do. And
You know, we got $5 Black Americans and tethers. This guy is definitely holding it down for the Nigerian.
there you go. And anyways, so yeah, shout out to one man. Thank you very much for the support. Always generous with the pound sterling. And yes, don't worry, my man. You'll get your product. You'll get your product here. It's already done. Now, let us move on to Lion Legal. Okay, and this is about advice with regards to the intangibles of success. We're talking about discipline. We're talking about knowing that people are going to screw you over. We're talking about how to build and maintain networks, all these other kinds of things, right? Whether you're going blue collar, whether you're going into college, what are your thoughts regarding this? And perhaps you could put it within the context of the arenas in which you actually can test yourself, or the kinds of tests you're going to face outside of the academic context, right? So you, and then we'll get into Dr. Thunder as well. And Dr. Thunder, you were right about to tell us about those arenas in which you could get tested. So you can say that and close us out. So Lion Legal, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts on academic success, basically, or blue collar
Success in life. Success in
Yeah,
life.
success in life.
Why are
Okay,
you still
so
in
so
academia,
there was
sir?
a
Go ahead.
story I heard. There was a man who grew up and he was interested in playing the piano, so he got piano lessons. He had a strong interest in it, but he felt that it will be very difficult and it's an unsure path of success to be a musician. So rather than do that, he simply went on and became an accountant. And he did that for 25 years. Unfortunately, he was driving down the road one day, got into a car accident, and died. And he went to heaven. When he was at the gates, he was going in, an angel saw him and he was talking about his life, his aspirations. And he said, one thing I regret in life is that I wanted to be the best, or become a musician. But he asked the angel, of all of the musicians, Tupac, etc., this, that, who was the best musician that ever lived? And the angel said, you were. If you had followed your dreams, if you had done the hard work to be successful, you would have been bigger than all of the musicians that you just named right now. And that's what success is. Success is not having to regret your past decisions. It's taking advantage of the opportunities that you have and doing the best with all of them, whether it's academics, whether it's the fact that you have a particular talent or skill, whether it's the fact that you're a good writer. That is a true success. So if they're in school, simply push hard, get the best grades you can. If you're in a blue collar work hard, do the best you can. That is success.
Well put, right? Now, regret is a big thing in life and death. And always is the case, right? In these kinds of recorded history about people talking about their regrets, maybe at their deathbed. The deathbed is typically the typical story. people always regret the things that they did not do. People don't bring up stuff they did, unless you're some kind of killer and you want to confess that you killed your aunt in '86 and buried her under the in the septic tank. But generally people say, hey, I should have taken that chance, I should have done this, I should have done that. So Dr. Thunder, we're closing out with you. We're talking about what it takes to succeed. The arenas in which you can get tested in dovetails right with this, so you can continue with where you were at.
So it's interesting. Music is a particular discipline that there are lots of ways to test in the real world, as it were. Playing with other musicians, writing music, goodness. I mean, some of the greatest musicians of all times have been ones that didn't go to school for music. And some of the artists that have sold the most records, written the most songs, didn't go to college, or at least not a traditional college. They may have gone to a sort of songwriters workshop, or gone to a sort of a trade school, but they didn't go to traditional college, which makes music a sort of,
John Mayer did.
and the arts in general, it makes it challenging. I think the arts were sort of hungry. I think the arts were hungry to, and by the way, you line legal, you're putting Berklee School of Music, a disproportionate number of students that go to Berklee do not graduate. They just go there to basically network. They may last for the first year.
People network in college? Really?
No.
So you mean socialize?
No, well, I'm talking about you go to college because that's where other folks go.
Oh, right. So people can actually socialize in college, which is a point that I made before. Ah, okay. Thank you, Dr. Thunder.
Okay. Anyhow, but my point is, it's not the education, it's not the teaching, it's the folks that are met. And there's a short number of schools that tend to attract students with a certain level of natural ability. They go to the school for a semester sometimes, meet other students that have a similar skill, and drop out of school. I mean, this happens all the time. I don't know that that's enough time to actually truly be socialized by the institution. I think it's more about establishing and connecting with other folks that have a passion for the same discipline. But there's a lot of opportunities to do that, not necessarily going to school. One way that musicians do that is they move to different places in the country. A lot of musicians moved to New York, for instance. They didn't go to college necessarily. They moved to New York because they believe if they move to New York, they'll be able to bump elbows with other folks that go to jam sessions and other, and show up at different concerts and try to meet people and start networking. They get a job as a waiter. Musicians do this in Nashville. You have a ton of singer-songwriters that move to Nashville, and they're not going to college, but they go down there and they start bussing tables and being a waiter, and they do that for a period of time as they're going to all the clubs and connecting with all the folks that they need to connect with, right, to make this connection. I'm not going to say that college provides no opportunity for socialization and or that college has never presented it an opportunity for students to move, or rather for students to meet. That would never be my argument. But as a person, as a musician that teaches music for a living, that is a college professor, um, what it is that I see disproportionately is the students that actually go to college for music. Often is the case, they're not the most natural. They're not the ones that have the most natural ability. Often is the case, the ones that have the most natural ability will go some other direction, and it's been very difficult when locating one of these students that have that sort of otherworldly natural ability to get them to even go to college, because they have too many opportunities already.
Shout out to Brian, and yeah, shout out to the Kaiserians. They're showing up today and they're super chatting and they're talking about jollof rice and jambalaya, red rice and beans, and Popeyes, and Chick-fil-A not open on Sundays, and all that good stuff. Ain't that right, LAR? Now, ladies and gentlemen,
red beans
in
and
the
rice.
in the future,
Red beans and rice, not red rice.
right. in the future, I think people that come onto this panel would be well served by understanding that it's not a good idea to try to show up one of the hosts. So just I'm just saying.
you're just saying IJS. Shout out to you guys, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Just Call Me Brian. Shout out to John Zola. Shout out to One Man for the numerous super chats. Shout out to the Deacon as well. Okay, the Deacon Naker, I believe is his name. Dotty Girl, always representing with the super chats as well. Very generous today. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about power, status, money, college versus the trades, right? And we covered the whole swath. We talk about the fact, the ROI, the return on investment. There is a high cost in time and tuition. Am I going to get the bang for my buck? 80% of these degrees, right, of which, by the way, there is more proliferation of degrees if you count the numbers in the BS side as opposed to the non-BS side. Okay, no disparaging anybody else, but if we go from one extreme to the other, there's not a lot of new kind of physics degrees just being popped out. But if you go to certain critical studies departments, right, there is a new chair and a new this and a new that constantly happening. Okay, so 56% of Americans say, hey, college is not a good investment for these reasons. However, it is still the case that college graduates enjoy higher earnings, right? And this may just be the fact because they have higher IQ, it's a self-selected group, and so on and so forth. We talked about socialization, we talked about status, and we talked about the things that are necessary for success overall. And with that, we're going to say our goodbyes. Okay, join us next time, Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, come back on Wednesday for Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. Going to be on Dr. Thunder's channel or my channel. I forget now. But the train keeps on rolling week after week. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we are out.
Peace.
in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What draws behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.